Welcome to Centric, your one-stop shop for everything technology in your business. I'm your host, Chris Benese, and today we're talking about the central anxiety in the tech industry right now, which is generative AI. I hear it from my clients, I hear it from my teams, and I'm sure many of you in our audience, especially those of you who are up and coming and building your careers, are feeling it too. You're wondering if your skills you're building today will be relevant in 5 years. You're worried about your job, your career path, and your future. The broader channel, as you know, is about how executives should be thinking about tech. But these interviews that we do are for you. They're about showing you paths people have taken. And today, I have a story that I think is a critical case study for this exact moment. It's a roadmap for navigating profound career disruption. My guest today is Jared McElwee. Jared is a former Microsoft employee who retired in 2019 after a 22-year career. He started as a software tester, rose through the ranks to become a senior manager, and then about 14 years into his profession, the thing that he built his career around was eliminated in a massive reorg. His story is about what happens when somebody moves your cheese, but more importantly, it's about resilience, self-awareness, and a long-term discipline strategy that allowed him to not only survive that disruption, but to thrive, ultimately architecting a life of financial independence that let him walk away from the game on his own terms in his mid-40s. So Jared, welcome to TechCentric.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to sort of set the stage for our listeners. Take us back, if you could, to 1997. You start at Microsoft right out of college. You're a software test engineer. For our listeners who maybe never have been in a dedicated test role, what was that job like? What's it like to break stuff for a living?
You know, for me, it was a fun job. You are paired up with a developer and a program manager on some feature area in the product. And as a tester, your accountability is write the test plan and write the automation. And then, just like you said, break it. Assume the bugs are there and go find them and get them logged in the system. So you kind of end up taking this destructive approach to your feature and finding all the weak spots in it. So I kind of got some enjoyment out of that approach.
Nice. Now, you spent 14 years on the SharePoint team. What kept you on one product so long, and what was it like to see it evolve from a product that shipped on CDs, which some of our listeners have probably never seen, I know I have, to this massive global cloud subscription service?
Yeah, I started on a team called Office Web Server, which was one of the precursors to SharePoint. This is back in, I guess, Office 2000. Office 9 equals Office 2000. And I had a feature called Web Folders. And this was it's called a namespace extension. It showed up in Windows Explorer under my computer, and it allowed you to browse folders on your web server, and the stuff you would expect to do in Windows Explorer: copy, paste, and drag, drop, and rename, delete, and stuff like that. And when we started, the product cycles were long. I think Office, 2+ years long. And so you start out with this a vision and specs, and that turns into test plans, and that turns into code, and iterate for multiple milestones. And at the end, by the end, you probably instituted what we called Workaholic Wednesdays, where you're staying late to whatever, regress bugs or fix bugs or find bugs. We would order dinner for the team. And then at the end, it's a huge celebration, a big ship party. Everybody's in our case, it was in the atrium, celebrating, people jumping in the fountains or getting thrown in the fountains outside. So it was it was kind of this long cycle. But what kept me on the team was every 2 years or so, there was an opportunity for a mini job change, because you would start the next version. And so you could move on to a different feature or a different area or a different part of the team. Maybe you were on UI before and you go to internals, or same thing, opportunity to move to different positions. I started as a individual contributor. After a while, I became a test lead. After a while, I became a test manager. So there's always a kind of a new challenge to look forward to a few years down the road. It was a big shift going from the box product to how we now, customers now consume it via the cloud. And so I was there for that transition, and that move, that ability to host and monitor and run stuff ourselves kind of precipitated some of the changes in the way Microsoft organized its disciplines.
So as you said, during that time you rose from a tester to a test lead to a test manager. You were managing teams of leads. So it's safe to say by the early 2010s, you've got this deep 14-year long career, and presumably your identity is, Jared McElwee, a SharePoint product test manager, and you were a really deep expert in the discipline and the platform and in the product.
Yeah, that's how I thought of myself around that time. I'd been on the team for a while. I've been a test manager on the team for a while. And so that was kind of what I felt like at heart. I was a tester, and I liked that side of the discipline. So that's where I was in 2013.
At that point, then you've accomplished all this. You're happy with where you're at. You know who you are, and then, as I said at the top of the show, somebody moved your cheese, and the test discipline was eliminated. And for those of us who are in the technology industry, this concept of eliminating the testing discipline is probably sounding pretty shocking right now, but help us understand what happened in that moment and what was actually happening at Microsoft that caused this to happen, and what did they backfill testing of the platform with?
Well, the way we were delivering software changed in a big way. When we're working on the box product, it's out there. We have limited ability to change it once we ship it. Can issue QFEs, hot fixes, or you can do service packs. But those are pretty heavyweight and not quick turnaround. And we have little ability to tell what's going on with it once it's out there. Especially, let's see, what do we have? Back then we got crash reports for sure. Did we get those for server? I don't remember. I'm sure, people were even more sensitive about sending data up from their servers. So we had little insight, especially compared to today, on what's going on with the software we just spent 2 years building. It was indirect. It was anecdotes from customers and bug reports from customers and talks from customer visits and things like that. That all changed when we were running it ourselves in our own data centers. We would install it ourselves. We would be able to monitor what is going on with it. We could respond quickly. We could turn around a fix extremely quickly if we needed to. Our executive at the time, when we were making this shift, encouraged us to be very hands-on with the product. Keep in mind the team is coming from this model where we build it and then we give it to somebody else, and then we'll fix the bugs we hear about, but we're on to the next version at that point. So we made this shift to the cloud, and as part of that, our executive in charge of the division encouraged us to be very hands-on with the product. This was a big change compared to what we had come from. And so, we were involved now in the day-to-day running and operation and monitoring and fixing of hundreds of SharePoint servers. When did it become thousands? I'm sure soon after that. So, for example, the it was a lot for the team to swallow. At some point, we had to ask for everybody's cell phone numbers because they were going to have on-call duty. And this, it was just a huge change. I mentioned Workaholic Wednesdays before, and that was kind of at the end of the product cycle. You knew there was going to be a crunch, but now you're constantly on the hook if something is going wrong with your area, and your help is needed.
So is it fair to say that prior to this sort of paradigm shift, as a tester, you were a development tester. Your teams were development testers because all you were ever able to really test was, in the parlance of folks who were maintaining stuff at a company, you were testing development and then running it over to a QA server so you get everything going. But you never really got to the point where now you had to worry about ongoing monitoring and testing in production until cloud came along. And suddenly you had a whole different type of testing you had to do, regression testing, et cetera, in the cloud because you were actually the owners of the production environment. And that just never happened when you were shipping stuff out in CDs.
That's right. Yeah. Now it was ours. We were running it. It was our problem to understand. It was our problem if it was difficult to deploy and monitor and maintain and update. And not that it wasn't our problem before, but any issues we felt much less directly and with a long lag. By the time this customer feedback got to us. And so seeing that it was going to be important for teams to really understand how their own product worked and what was, how it actually behaved at scale in a data center in real time. This executive was very encouraging of us being close to it, including, people doing on-call duty. And so this was a kind of a shift for the team. I remember it was around this time that we were making the shift, and I remember an April Fool's joke that I was particularly proud of.
Okay.
We were kind of into the team. I think it felt like we were stepping into crazy town. Like, give me your cell phone. I might need to call you. You're going to rotate through this duty. And I remember on April 1st, I sent a mail to the whole team, all disciplines, my test team, but also all the developers, all the PMs. And man, I wish I saved that mail. But it was something to the effect of, okay, now that we're making this transition, we've talked about on-call and all these things, but there's some additional responsibilities we're going to need everybody to pick up. And it was something like, capacity is an issue, and we're expanding data centers, and we have a shipment of machines coming in, so we're going to need everybody to physically carry machines off of the truck into the data center. And if lifting over 40 pounds is a problem for you, talk to me or your manager immediately so we can find other duties, and just kind of some stuff that was
Nice.
at the moment. Looking back, it's outrageous, but at the moment, they're like, "Whoa, what's this? Can this be real?" I'm sure plenty of people figured out the stuff I was saying with the date. But I know one thing I'm really proud of. There was a veteran developer who apparently saw that mail and went into his manager's office and threatened to quit. And so that's when I know, like, okay, this joke worked. I'll take that one. But it was that just kind of shows how big to illustrate how big a change it was and how the team was operating.
Well,
This same executive, we would have these I forget if they were monthly or weekly but review meetings on how the service was running. Part of that was talking about service incidents. Anytime we miss our SLA, account for every second of that. What happened and what was the root cause and what did you learn? And so we rotated through. Somehow I was speaking at this meeting for the missed minutes. Maybe it was an incident with my team, or we rotated through which manager was on duty. So maybe I had been on duty, and so therefore I speak about what happened that week. But it's just this big meeting, tons of people there. It was a meeting room with a divider wall, and we'd open the divider wall, and the room's just full, and people are on phone, and some of my team is on speakerphone. Everybody's kind of listening to this meeting. And I remember we got to my part where I'm explaining what's going on, and he was not happy with the downtime, as he, makes sense. But he really just laid into us. I remember, and just laid into me, and like, how could it take 2 minutes to tell me what's going on, and what did you do? And just kind of in this way that I was not used to. And but he wanted to, man, you got to keep the service up. You got to respond. You got to prevent this stuff. If it does happen, stuff does happen. You got to respond quickly. Don't make the same mistake twice. All those things. So he really just expressed his concern for that we're on top of this stuff, and kind of in the strong way. And then later, it was so jarring to me. I remember my ears were ringing after that. I don't think I heard what was going on into the rest of the meeting. I'm just kind of replaying what happened and what did he say and what did I say. And then afterwards I was in the men's room. And he walks in the men's room, and he goes, "Hey Jared, how's it going?" And I'm like, "How's it going? It's terrible. Like, you just ripped me apart in front of the whole team." And he's like, "Yeah, man, I know, but this is the big leagues. I got to go account for our SLA. Nothing personal. That's where we're at." And he, just so I have a ton of respect for this guy. Just amazing knowledge and precision in the way he thinks about things. And I kind of realized that to a certain extent there was some theater in what had happened in this meeting. So many people were watching. He wanted to help galvanize the team around how important it was that we were on top of this stuff. So it was just, that's one of the things that sticks out from my incident manager duty is meetings like that. I was able to see them differently after that. And man, I'll say I think the team came a long way really quickly, in part because of the focus that he helped bring. But this is what started the shift in, or accelerated, or maybe sort of put the nail in the coffin of the test discipline as we had been doing it. There was no need for this. We weren't taking 2 years. There was no need to test it for months and months and months and think you're going to find everything. And now we could monitor what it was doing right this second, and how fast this thing was taking, and how many errors we hit of this type and this type. And once we detected that stuff, we could also fix it very quickly. So of course we still had to test, but it was a much different kind of testing than we had been doing before.
So I do want to dig into this pretty deeply, because I think for the folks listening, that this is sort of the core of what folks are imagining is about to happen to them with the introduction of generative AI and agents and such. And I did a little bit of research into this moment in time in Microsoft's history, and this wasn't a small reorg. This was a pretty massive public strategy that Microsoft announced, where they merged their software developer and development engineer and tester role into their developer role. And at the time, you were a high-level manager in the testing discipline, and I'd really like to know sort of what was that like emotionally and professionally. You were leading a whole team of people, and their career ladders that you had presumably been helping them along throughout their careers as they worked for you was being sort of systematically dismantled in front of their eyes and just evaporating. How did you manage through that? What was it like?
Mm. You know, as I remember it, it happened over time and in different ways at the company. Groups tend to approach it in different ways. You know, some would do a blanket layoff, and some would do, some other approach. I kind of remember us being near the end, having seen some other groups go first, and we did. I thought that each group would approach it in the way that made best sense for them and what situation they were in. And so how it happened on our team was, just like you said, the testers got converted basically to developers and moved to the development team. Before that, we did have a round of layoffs. And that for me was I guess, sort of the pivotal moment or sort of the wake up call, like, oh yeah, this is happening. This is real.
Mm-hmm.
One day I came to work and 1/3 of my team, 20%, 1/3 was not there. This is not something that I had a heads up maybe that morning, or maybe it was the night before, but not even a list of names at that point. Like, here's what's going on. Something's happening. No one checked in with me on, hey, how's this list look to you? You want to, these are things that were decided further up and kind of, I'm sure, using some objective criteria, right? And whoever matched the filter matched the filter. So that was a tough day for sure. There was a new guy on the team. I guess he had been there, I don't know, maybe a month, and he's looking at me afterwards like, what is going on? What is happening? There was experienced person on the team, awesome tester. Got the meeting request. This is more early days before when you got one of those. I feel like now if you get one of those, you kind of know what's up.
Yep.
This is like 2014 or something. So I remember him had seen the mail in the morning, so I knew what was up. And I remember him stopping by my office and saying, yeah, I got this. It's kind of weird. There's this meeting and these people are here. And so I wonder why, it's in a little bit and I wonder what's going on. And that was a tough, I told him I wasn't going to send him off there and I'm just walk into it but it's still, I remember us, he was speechless, as was I. So it was that was a hard day for the team and for me and for a bunch of people. But so there we are at the end of that, and the way our org chose to do it, and a bunch of other orgs did too, was convert a bunch of these testers into developers, and many of them. Most of them made the transition just fine, and kind of found the meld of being a tester and being conscious of quality, but also thinking of the stuff that's important that devs need to think about too. But it left me in kind of an awkward spot because now I'm this. I've been a manager for a while, so I was less into the day-to-day stuff of day-to-day tools and ins and outs of individual contributor testers, let alone the day-to-day tools of an individual contributor developer.
So, you and I spoke, we've spoken before, and one of the things you mentioned about this was that you think they might have moved a little bit too far away from the testing discipline, which, given your career and what you had done there, it's a reasonable perspective to have. But I think the important thing for our viewers is going to be, you're 14 years into that career. You have that disagreement with the overall core company strategy that's happening in that moment, and you can't change it. So, sort of, what was the mindset in your head? What was your mental framework around what am I going to do about this? How do I want to react to this versus sort of your gut reaction versus how you sort of decided to manage your emotional response?
Yeah, at a certain point, it became clear that this was not a place where the decision makers were looking for feedback on, hey, should we do this? Like
Mhm.
this is happening. This is how it's going to be done. The team was a large part of my identity. I cared about the success of the team, and so I felt this responsibility as a manager, and so I was going to do my best to help be part of dialing it in, and maybe steer how it's implemented in our team, like how we make this transition without just giving up on, without throwing too much testing over the side, and find the right balance that we need to strike.
And did that bear fruit, or did it just kind of eventually land where you went, okay, that this isn't going to go the way I want it to, but
Um, I think the org did a good job in we landed in an okay spot with it, but it was certainly the start of an adjustment to now spreading these test responsibilities, more in the dev discipline.
got it. So I know when that decision was made and once all the transitions were completed, you kind of had to figure out what your next role was. And when we had spoken before, you mentioned that there was an executive that he was pretty generous and he told you, hey, pick whatever you want, right? This is a fork in the road in your career. Uh, and I've seen folks, especially in today's market, who would take that personally. They'll get angry, they'll feel insulted on principle. I've seen folks storm out of the building. You didn't. You took a step back, and you made a rational decision. But can you talk a bit about the sort of the emotional resilience required to do that, uh, and see it as an opportunity rather than as an attack on your past accomplishments?
Mm. Yeah, looking back, I can see how it could have gone in a much worse way. It was hard at the time, but yeah, I had the person in charge of the team was kind enough to say, hey, take as long as you need to think about it, and then pick what you want to do. With a little star, except test manager, we don't have those anymore,
Yep.
and let me know, and then we can figure that out. Um, so I think I was by that point probably disappointed and disoriented, but I liked my career at the company. I love the company, and I love the team, and I love the product. And so the reality on the ground was that, like, I mean, this is where we're at. We're doing a different thing now. Test manager's not a thing. So I really wasn't in a position to stomp my feet and say, well, I want this. He was.
Yep.
It was. I felt it was great that I was being offered such a choice. And especially now looking back, I know there were other options on the table, or in some other universes, I would not have had any choice if I had
Yeah.
even still been around. Um,
Yeah.
so I was happy to continue and hope that I would find a way to adjust to the new thing that wasn't Jared the tester, but Jared the whatever I was, Jared the dev engineering manager or whatever.
Well, and it's a good point because I think when we had talked, you said you kind of made a really ambitious choice to finally answer that question, and you basically told them, "I want to solve the hardest dev problem on the team that you got, and I just want to report to you. Like this is what I want to do. I want to focus on the biggest problem you have, which is bold, to say the least." What was your thinking there? Were you trying to prove something to yourself, or you just didn't want to be bored? Did you think that would be the most rewarding path? Like, what was the thought process?
Yeah, I look at it sometimes. I think, what was my thinking there? I think some of it was, a little bit of like, well, let me prove it that I can, I can add value even in this new thing. I think part of it is let me prove it to myself. I think part of it was I wanted to, stay in the management career path, but I thought, okay, to be a good manager, I should, as a dev, eventually, I should know how to do the dev IC job.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I asked to work on a really challenging area. I asked to report to not the guy who offered me this opportunity, but the one below him, the dev manager. So this my former peer,
Yep.
was part of the triad dev test PM, and so
Yep.
now he's my boss. Luckily, awesome guy, ton of respect for him. But that was the scenario I set up. Like, okay, let me figure this. We're doing devs now. Okay, let me figure this dev thing out and see what I could do.
Now, from what I recall, uh, you did that for a little bit, and you sort of had a bit of self awareness, and you said, "You know what? I'm not liking this. This isn't for me." And I really want to make sure that folks hear this because this is probably one of the most important lessons for folks listening to this. It takes a lot of self awareness and sort of wrestling to the ground your own ego to admit to yourself that, hey, I made this bold bet and it didn't pay off the way I wanted. And a lot of courage to say, well, you know what? It's not going to work out, so I'm going to try the next thing and say, okay, yeah, I pivoted once, it didn't work out, so I'm going to pivot again. So, talk about that. Like, what was that event like?
Yeah, to me it was pretty starkly apparent that this was just not the role for me. Um, just kind of the way I felt doing it, going from part of my job at that point was a lot of conversations with people, kind of ironic given my introverted nature that I ended up in such a spot. But then I'm kind of there and I'm isolated uh, with me and the monitor and the keyboard and the mouse. That was a change. And then the kind of the kind of level skill mismatch. In this
Mm-hmm.
change, I had retained my level, my
Mm-hmm.
internal, I don't know, call it sort of a rank
Yep.
in the pay scale. Yet I was now an individual contributor developer, and so that mapped to high expectations for me as a developer.
Yep.
And here I am with I knew how to navigate product cycles and keep things on track, but I had sort of the day-to-day knowledge of the tools, especially the
Mm-hmm.
dev tools. I was like a new hire. I was like an intern.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember the first thing I did, I think, is what we often asked new hires to do was, okay, welcome to Microsoft. Why don't you fix a bug? And so
Mm-hmm.
I found some bug to fix. I remember it was a QFE for a customer. It was like a small feature request from a customer. Um, but here I am, like, okay, how do I set up my enlistment? Hey, guys, how do I build? I'm getting this error. Like, what do I do with this error?
Yep.
There's some people I felt comfortable, expressing my helplessness to, like they would understand. Okay, Jared's not a total coconut. He's just new at this stuff. Let me show him how to do a build and fix his enlistment and stuff like that. But it's just very humbling. And
Hmm.
so it just felt to me like clearly not the right fit. And
Yep.
as I projected down the road, I did not think it was going to work out well
Hmm.
in the long run. So that's when I decided to look for another place to go. And for me, that was big. I've been on SharePoint since I started. It's probably
Hmm.
17 years at this point, and I was going to jump to another team.
And that's when you moved over to the Excel team as an engineering lead, working on charts and that sort of stuff, which I mean certainly seems more aligned with where your career had been at before the disruption. And for me personally, working on things like data telemetry and net promoter scores and that kind of stuff. I'm a DNA guy, so that sounds fascinating, and I've spent a lot of my life in Excel, so pretty interesting to talk to somebody who's been there. But did that move back towards sort of a leadership and data analysis style of a role feel like more of a natural fit given your background?
Yeah, now we're getting closer. Boy, if I had my druthers, I'd still do testing, but that
Hmm.
wasn't an option. So now we're getting closer with what I was doing on Excel. I loved Excel. I was always into data viz and trying to convey a message with a picture, especially a chart. Um, and from my time in SPO, is what we had been calling it then, SharePoint Online,
Hmm.
I was pretty well versed in telemetry and the
Hmm.
benefits of that. And the client teams, as we call them,
Hmm.
everything's from our perspective is the server. So, Excel, that's the thing that talks to the server. That's the client team. So the client teams were newer at this telemetry stuff, not brand new, but so I was able to bring a lot of the stuff I had learned on the value of telemetry to Excel. So we ended up instrumenting, um, it lended itself to the problem. We were adding new chart types to Excel. And
Hmm.
so we could use data on how much the old ones were being used or not, and how much the new ones were being used, and what sorts of things people were doing with them. And so um, I got a lot of sort of enjoyment about the instrumentation we added, and
Hmm.
looking at that data to come to conclusions about, which one was more important or less important, or features or bugs to fix or things like that. Um, and Yeah, I was an engineering manager at that point, so I had team was small, 6, 7, 8, something like that, developers, and we were just kind of working on these charts. We worked on some other stuff too, but that
Yeah.
was a much closer fit for me.
So this is fascinating to me because I've met plenty of people who've retired successfully, but very, very, very few people who've retired so young successfully. I mean, you were in your mid 40s, and you talk about you were able to do this by being a disciplined investor and a frugal spender. Um, and it kind of echoes this movement, the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. Was that a sort of a conscious goal for you early on? Was that was kind of your plan throughout your career at Microsoft?
It wasn't the day one plan. Um, I became interested in investing in college, and trying out different strategies and reading a bunch of books and that sort of thing. Um, at some point, I learned about back testing, kind of the
Hmm.
crossover. For me, it was a crossover of coding and investing. There was
Okay.
this app called Wealth Lab where you could write a strategy, a set of rules in, I think it was C sharp. For example, if the price is above the moving average, then buy it. And 10 days later, if it's below the moving average, then sell it. And then you could say, what would happen if I did that on this universe of stocks for the past 10 years? And inevitably, which way it's going to go down when this is on camera. You would lose money. Was the answer to that. But that didn't stop me from messing around with strategies like that for a long time, trying to find something that I would actually put some money into, and I never did. Nothing I would want to invest in. But at some point in my career, I did start thinking about what retirement was going to look like, and how long it might take, and how I might do that. I don't know, maybe around halfway through, I started kind of modeling stuff out. How much would I need, and how long would it take, and that sort of thing. At some point, I did. Say that again.
So in your early 30s.
Yeah, must have been. Yep.
Okay.
I did go to a financial advisor at one point and posed the question to him to check my math. Like, hey, basically the question was, hey, the project I'd like you to work on is how much money will I need to retire? Here's my situation. How much money will I need? And so he I remember he came back with a plan. He came back with a figure that I'm like, what? What? No. And he had seen too some of the trading I'd done and some of the things I invested in. I remember him saying like, hey, look, I could tell you like what I think you should invest in, but I'm gonna guess you're not gonna do what I say. I'm like, yeah, I kind of have my thing that I would like to do. But as part of that conversation, it was sort of this reality check. And okay, here's what a financial advisor says the figure is. But at some point, he mentioned this website called Mr. Money Mustache. Don't even know if it's still around. It was this blogger that pursued financial independence. And so he would write about various topics on it. And so that then I knew the term, and then I started researching a little more, and then I started understanding the underpinning concept a little more, and then I was able to kind of sketch out from there what I thought the figure was going to need to be.
So one of the things that when you were telling me this story last time we talked, one of the things that kind of shocked me is I don't know if they still have it today, but for a long time, Microsoft sort of had this philosophy a lot of tech companies do. It was the 55-15 rule. Basically, you retire at age 55 with 15 years of service as a minimum, and you'd get to keep your unvested stock. You obviously retired well before 55. You beat that plan by a decade, but it also means, or it implies, that there was a set of golden handcuffs that effectively you left behind, and were okay doing it, and were comfortable retiring without it. What was that like? I mean, that's kind of anathema to a lot of folks these days.
Yeah, as you even as you start, some of your compensation is in stock, and then as you progress through your career ladder, more and more of your compensation ends up being in stock. But like you said, always kind of dangled in front of you. Mm-hmm. You can get a little bit after 1 year, 2 years, and maybe it vests in 4 years or 5 years. I don't remember. But that stacks up. Every review, you get a kind of fresh set onto the future. And so, yeah, like you said, at age 55 with 15 years of service, all that now vests immediately. So that can be a big, there can be a large, depending on how long, what level you're at and how your reviews went and all that stuff, that can definitely add up.
Yep.
But I guess I saw it as like there's never, that was a ways off for me at that point. Mm-hmm. I didn't think I could do, 10 more years. it was such a change for me to move away from tests. I found stuff that hopefully I was useful at, and I added value, but it just wasn't like testing for me. And
Mhm.
so I was kind of. Have you ever heard of the game Age of Empires?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we used to play that. Sometimes at work we'd play it, and I was the guy that would. This is what? How would you call it? This sort of civilization building, acquire resources, and
Yep.
build weapons and advance, and then go kill the other guy on his island or
Hmm.
whatever it was. And so
Yep.
I was the one that would just um, accumulate wood, and so I'd have this giant pile of wood while the next guy's coming with some modern battleship or whatever it was in Age of Empires to just blow up my island.
Yep.
And so there was something, something in sort of my genetics. I think that I was just happy accumulating without spending as much as
Yep.
there was in that pile. And so I had sort of a model sketched out, and I knew the numbers, and I trusted my model, and at some point I made the decision.
That shows some pretty impressive self-discipline. I don't know that you see a ton of people with that these days, but important. And again, lesson for our viewers, right? If you want to take control of your life, it's something to do. There is a movie, and I'm not going to quote the movie because they cuss too much in it, but it's called The Gambler with Mark Wahlberg, and John Goodman plays this loan shark, and Mark Wahlberg goes to him to borrow $500,000 because he wants to bet it on this big game that he's going to play, and he basically gets a lesson in fiscal discipline and sanity from John Goodman playing this loan shark. Uh, and he basically describes to him this concept of FU money, where he's like, you need $2.5 million, buy a house, put the other 2 million in the bank at 5%, and now that's what you've got. If somebody wants you to do something you don't want to do, you don't do it. If your job changes and you don't want to go that way anymore, you want to do something else, you don't do it. But getting to that point takes a lot of fiscal discipline and planning ahead. You know what I mean? So I think it's encouraging to see somebody's managed to do that so effectively. So before you finally retired, you took a sabbatical, a bit of a test run, if you will, before you moved on and decided to step away from your time at Microsoft. And what did you learn during that test run, if you will, that gave you the final confidence to say, okay, I'm done. My plan worked. This is what I want to do.
Yeah, I spent that time away, and I was worried I'd be restless, I'd be purposeless, I'd be just at sea. What do I do with my time? But I enjoyed it. I had more stuff that I wanted to do than I had time to do. I wasn't bored, so I weighed that against continuing work, and I was gonna miss the people, but some of the aspects of work I was not, just didn't compete with um, being on my own time and pursuing the things I wanted to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
And I told myself, even on the people side, well, it's not like I can't go back,
Mm-hmm.
have lunch. On a nice day, a lot of people ate lunch outside the cafeteria. I could wander up and, hey, how's it going? What's going on? It turns out this was right before COVID. So I did not end up establishing any kind of cafeteria check-in rhythm.
Yep.
But no, I was confident that I would I would find a way to add structure to my time in a way that I would like, and I would not just be drifting.
So, and I think one of the ways were able to do that, and I, from what I understand, it was a huge motivating reason behind why you finally made the decision to leave, and that was to spend more time with your son, who was 9 at the time. Presumably now he's what, 13, 14?
Yeah,
Uh,
15.
and you wanted to be there for his formative years, and so you sort of swapped the commute to be able to chaperone field trips and go to ball games and that kind of stuff. How did that sort of change your relationship with your family? Did it have the effect that you wanted, and was it as fulfilling as you were hoping?
Thinking of how that would go, and his age was also a big factor in my decision. Like maybe I could have kept going for a while at the company, pursue some other thing, and then I knew I could retire at some point. Um, but then if I keep going, I retire when he's say 16. Now I'm that's just a less, I thought at the time, opportune time to bond. Like maybe, who knows, he was 9 at the time, maybe he's going to be a grumpy teenager, maybe he's not going to want to hang out with dad, like I don't know. Like
Yep.
certainly 9, it was still cool, you were still allowed to admit that you had parents, and you
Yep.
didn't mind if they showed up in at school during your art projects while you're making stuff out of clay or whatever. They chaperoned a band field trip, or like that was still
Yep.
okay. Um, so that was part of the what weighed in. Like, okay, I figured like now it's time to do it. Um, but then I saw, once I did it, it was more obvious to me how when I was working, how I would get sucked into it. And, besides the obvious um, time I'm out of the house at work, and, then I'm home at 6 p.m. or whatever it was, and you got limited time with the family at that point before everybody goes to bed. Um, I was distracted. I was still thinking about it. And I was thinking
Yep.
about what happened that day and what was going to happen the next day. And what about this meeting? And what about this TPS report missing a cover sheet? And what about I was just, it was hard to get out of it. Um, but once that was gone, I was way more present,
Hmm.
and I couldn't tell so much at the time. It was much more obvious afterwards,
Yep.
how much my brain space could go there. Um, so I was just. I think the difference it made with me and the family is I was really present. I could spend this time and focus on it, and I'm grateful for that.
That is excellent. Again, fortunate when you manage to plan appropriately and get to do something like that. And uh, one of the things I found fascinating in our discussion is you were telling me you actually code more now than when you were at Microsoft, and you're working on building an app to help with your day trading, and another one to connect to audio interfaces and such, and analyze the precision of your drumming and those sorts of things. Is that is that purposeful? Is that sort of a hey? That's kind of the point. In order for me to enjoy retirement, I have to retire to something, not just retire and go sit on a beach somewhere and not stimulate my brain.
Yeah, I feel like I have to keep my brain engaged. I like routine. So I have one where you can, in the morning, I wake up and do this, and I get to help get my son off to school, and then I'll code something, trading app or whatever I'm working on at the time. Maybe I'll do a little trading, uh, launch practice, etc. So I like some structure, and I got to have some. I still want some goals and a purpose and some projects to work on. And I had that at work. There was a ship date, or there was a promo, or there was a
Yep.
title or a position that I was looking for, or whatever. And so um, the model is the same, just that the thing is different. But
Got it.
yeah, I think for me at least, I need the structure. I need some kind of checkpoint I'm heading towards. Even if these days it's my, like I put it there and I kind of decide how far away it is and how ambitious or not it is, but I'm still heading towards that thing.
So, Jared, I think that is an incredible story of balance, with your mornings with your son, and then coding and trading in the afternoons, and music and house projects, and then getting to spend the evenings with your family. But I want to make sure I get some advice from you for the audience that are dealing with their own career disruptions right now and are kind of confused and don't know what to do. Some of them are scared and probably paralyzed. You know, you went through something very similar. What advice would you give to them to help them sort of get some focus and help alleviate some of their fear?
Yeah, I think I'm cognizant in my situation the role that luck played. Um, I felt lucky that I ended up in that job. I feel lucky in that maybe my sort of cool head with stocks. I think I love to say it's some superhuman discipline I have, but I think it's my genetics that I was born with, just kind of make me sort of even keeled no matter what, and that has pros and cons, but it helped for stocks, and then
Hmm.
I think it helped for some of this career stuff too, where I didn't freak out,
Hmm.
but I think the couple things that maybe people can consider. One is a piece of advice. I feel like this came from another Microsoft executive, but the way I internalized it was don't change two things at once. So if you're making some big change, don't
Hmm.
So for me, that meant I'm gonna become a dev, but I'm gonna
Hmm.
stay on SharePoint. I know
Yep.
the surroundings, I know the people, I know how it works,
Yep.
and so that's not new, and I can focus on this new thing. Or this applies to my other moves too. There was a component that wasn't a change, but there was a change, but it wasn't all brand new. And I'm just like, who's the team, and how does this work, and what's this, and what's the process? Like Excel, we had been mm, closely related in the org, and I
Yep.
knew the guy I was going to report to.
Okay.
Same thing with the team I joined after that on customer satisfaction. I knew the org and the space was a lot closer to my testing roots, and so I would try to plant one foot and then keep that there and then pivot the other to the extent you can control that. I think that's a good. For me, it was I don't know, reassuring that
Yep.
here's this large piece I know and understand 80%, and this 20% is different. I got to figure that out. And then um, the other thing I'd say is like take a deep breath. There are lots
Mm.
of ways this can go. If the way it's going for you is it's a change for you at the company, and a company you like, and a career you want to keep doing, like, okay, take a deep breath. Things change. Be ready to kind of go through that learning curve for the new thing, but you have experience at the company. You'll go through that. You might start out like I did as a new hire. How do I kick off a build?
Yeah.
But you'll get through that quickly. I figured out how to build. It was just embarrassing the first couple times. And you work through that stuff, and you bring what you learned from your previous experience with you while
Mhm.
you're picking up some of these new skills and adjusting to the new thing. And it's just got to roll with the punches, I think.
I think that's pretty sound advice, and folks would do wise to listen to it. Well, Jared, thank you so much for doing this. I think your story is going to be incredibly valuable for our listeners, and I look forward to them watching it.
Thanks for having me. It was fun reminiscing about some of the old Microsoft days.
My pleasure. So, for everybody watching, that was Jared McElwee. He's a 22-year veteran of Microsoft, and I want to summarize what I'm kind of taking away from this conversation, because I think there's really two key lessons here that are going to be relevant. And the first is career resilience. Your cheese will be moved in your career. It's going to happen. Maybe it's not going to be AI this time, but eventually someone's going to move your cheese. It could be a reorg. It could be anything. But your identity can't be your job title. Be like Jared. Be resilient. Be self-aware and be willing to pivot. Even if you fail on your first pivot, like he did, that's just data. You're going to learn, you're going to adapt, and you're going to find the next fit. Keep moving forward. And the second one is around financial resilience. And I cannot stress this enough. The ultimate career freedom, the ultimate source of power in your own life is your financial independence. Jared's story is proof of this. He built a 22-year plan that gave him this sort of get out of jail free card. And it's allowed him to see the reorg as an opportunity and not a crisis. It allowed him to walk away in his own terms and be present for his family and for the life that he wanted, rather than having to take whatever was offered to him. So that's my roadmap from what we talked about here today. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. As always, if you like this content, please like, subscribe, ring the bell. And if you have any questions for myself or for Jared, please leave them in the comments below and we'll get back to you. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.